In this video, we're going to cover everything that you need to know about franchising. Join me as we dive into the reality of franchising and uncover how it can become a very satisfying and successful business journey. Let's get started. What is a franchise? A franchise is where an entrepreneur started his or her own business, and they were so successful that they started to scale it. They started to grow it to multiple zip codes or multiple cities or communities. They had proven the concept, and so now they wanted to go even faster with scaling and growing their operation. So they decide that the best way, the most cost-effective way to do that is through the franchise business model. In order to franchise or to award a franchise in the United States, you have to have proven systems, proven methods and procedures, and you have to make sure that you publish what's called an FDD, franchise disclosure document. And each franchisor in America that awards franchises, they go through that process. And at the local level, they're looking for folks who have intimate knowledge of their community, boots on the ground, so to speak. You understand the school system and the Chamber of Commerce, all the civic organizations that can help you drive that business. So you become a franchisee, an informal partner with that franchise brand to scale their operation in your local community. And they give you the opportunity to also scale that proven system of theirs in your market. What are the ownership types in franchising? Well, there are three basic popular ownership types in the franchise industry. The first is called an owner-operator. This is where the franchise brand requires that you give them a full-time push. That's 30 to 40 hours a week. And you're going to work that, let's say 9 to 18 months. Ideally, you're going to hit break even in that length of time. Sometimes you hit break even sooner, sometimes later. Much of that break even period has to do with how much experience do you have in terms of leadership and building and scaling teams. Much of it has to do with what kind of capital did you come to the table with? Do you have the right team on the field? Did you recruit the right talent? The second most popular ownership type in the franchise industry is the semi-absentee ownership model. This is where you get to keep your corporate job or your businesses or a combination of the two, and you give the franchisor 15 to 25 hours a week of your time and talent, energy, efforts to grow and scale that franchise brand in your local market. Then after somewhere between 12 and 24 months, you've hit break even. Now you can start to scale that operation by growing the business horizontally and then vertically. What do I mean by that? Well, after you hit break even, now you can add on even more territories, become a multi-unit operator in that space. And then years 2, 3, or 4, you can start to add a second or third franchise business model that don't cannibalize, but complement the first business model. Now, the third most popular ownership type, it's called the executive model or the absentee model. But I'll be honest with you, in my opinion, being in the industry for a bit, really no such thing as a true absentee model. Every business, especially the first 12 to 24 months, you should plan on investing a bit of time and effort, even on those called an absentee or an executive model. Once again, our most popular owner in the industry in terms of being an executive owner is Shaquille O'Neal of NBA. Shaq finds a business or a brand that he falls in love with, and he makes the investment. The industry helps him find a top talented general manager, operations manager, and then they scale that operation. Typically, if it's an executive model, absentee model, it's going to take you somewhere between months 15 to 30 to hit break even. But when you're someone like Shaq, a big time investor, in fact, Shaq has invested more than $200 million in the franchise industry. You have the time to wait those 18 to 24 or 36 months for it to hit break even. Once that happens, now the oil well is generating some nice profit. Of course, you can go and keep investing. That's how many investors build out their portfolio. They diversify their portfolio mitigate risk wherever possible. Many people, if you ask them, what's a franchise? Most will say McDonald's, and it's very true. McDonald's is the largest franchise system in the world. They have more than 13,000 locations here in the US, more than 37,000 locations worldwide. But there are a lot of very, very smart people who took the concepts of Ray Kroc and they've systematized other industries. So there are home service brands and senior care brands and pet care brands and health and wellness brands, sports and fitness, automotive, the list goes on and on. Just a litany of great franchises out there. We represent more than 30 unique industries, and we certainly will have a perfect fit for you with whatever your needs are. Now, what do you like most? Well, sometimes many of our clients, they're not sure what they want to get into. So we have a client questionnaire. It takes about 15 minutes to go through that. We have something called a Zoracle assessment. What the data from those two documents or processes tell us in the industry, where your strengths and weaknesses lie. And then our goal is to find you industries that are not just a good personality fit, but they're also a good income fit and a good lifestyle fit. I'm really into work-life balance myself for my wife and our family. And most of our clients that we work with, in fact, we enjoy working with folks that are looking for a good work-life balance and a lifestyle type of business. Now, SBA registry, let's talk about that briefly. That's important. The Small Business Administration, which is sponsored by the U.S. government, which is sponsored by us citizens paying our taxes, right? So if you're paying taxes and you're not taking advantage of all the benefits that you get by working closely with the SBA and SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives, doing some amazing work in helping entrepreneurs or wantrepreneurs, folks who want to own their own businesses, start, launch, and successfully scale their operation. Now, if you're going to invest in the franchise industry, I highly recommend that you make certain to invest only in franchise brands that are on the SBA registry. Now, what is that? Well, if I'm a franchisor or a business owner, an entrepreneur, now I want to get into the franchise business and scale across all 50 states, I want to go to the SBA, meet with their counsel there. They'll go through our methods and procedures and our processes. They'll look at how well we are doing financially, a number of different criteria that they look at, our management experience and so forth, and they vet us. And in some cases, they may tell a franchisor or someone who wants to become a franchisor and award franchises, hey, you need to check the box in these 5 categories and go away and do that. It's going to take you about 30 to 60 days. Come back to us. They come back 30, 60 days later. Sometimes they're still missing 1 or 2 items. They go back, keep working on it. And now after 90 days, let's say, they come back to the SBA. SBA checks all the boxes. And now that franchisor is added to what's called the SBA registry. Very important factor. Never, ever, ever invest in a franchise that hasn't been vetted or placed on the SBA registry. Okay, let's talk about support and training. So many of our candidates and clients that we speak with, they actually want to shift industries. They not only want to leave corporate America, but they don't necessarily want to do what their career or their degree called for. Can't tell you how many folks we work with in that case. They thought they wanted to open up a restaurant, but they wind up opening up a junk removal and moving company. So some wonder, do I have to be a contractor to get into one of those hot home service brands? Or do I have to have a license to take advantage of the senior care segment that's growing exponentially? Well, the answer to that question is no. You do not have to be an expert on any of our franchise brands and or industries. In fact, we prefer that you don't have specific subject matter expertise in those areas. Why? Because typically, most that have specific subject matter expertise, they want to go out and do all the work. They want to run the jobs themselves because no one can do that job like him or her. That is a big fallacy because while you're out there doing the jobs, you're not working on the business, you're working in the business. What we have found in our research and all the studies that we look at for the top franchisees. Show us the top 25 percenters in any system, and we'll show you folks that did not have subject matter expertise in that specific trade or industry. In other words, we want to find talent that understands how to build a team and scale a team. If that's you, every franchise business model that we have in our portfolio, they all offer comprehensive training for you and your general manager or operations manager. Our industry, we have a great recruiting system. We can always help you recruit for the top talent out there to do the technical work, but it's rare. So comprehensive training program, many of the brands that we represent, they'll even fly in trainers for you and on the ground support operations folks that are going to work with you one-to-one in your local market. Most will have a quick start or ramp start type program that's going to help you launch successfully, get off to some quick momentum in the first 60 to 90 days from the day that you open your franchise. Let's talk about franchise agreements for a bit. The typical franchise agreement, the average length is going to be 10 years, right? So some people wonder, if I sign a franchise agreement, is it indefinite? No franchise agreement is indefinite based on the FTC definition. By the way, we're regulated by the FTC, the entire industry, Federal Trade Commission, right? And so your franchise agreement, while it lasts 10 years, that's a great feeling out time. They're checking you out, you're checking them out. Obviously, if you're performing, they're going to want to keep, rolling this thing with you. You're going to want to keep rolling with them. And it's very easy, that renewable 10-year period. Some might renew after that first 10-year period every 5 years or so forth. But 10 years is the typical term. What are items 19 and 7? Those typically are the two most important or very important items in the FDD. That stands for the Franchise Disclosure Document. They're going to send you that document. They'll typically send it to you electronically, like a DocuSign. You have to sign the day you receive it. And the franchise, or the Federal Trade Commission rather, they're going to require that franchisor let you read that document for at least 14 days, okay? With that said, we have a plethora, an army of fantastic franchise attorneys that partner with us in our industry, franchise CPAs, franchise digital marketers, you name it, whatever the level of technical expertise that you need, folks who really understand the nuances, finer nuances of how to make a franchise successful sooner than later. We have those types of contacts and great referral sources within our industry. So items 19 and 7. 19 basically is going to show you, of those 23 items, 19 is going to show you what are the total sales or revenue for their system countrywide. Typically, they're going to break it down into median numbers. In some cases in the FDD, item 19, you'll see it broken down into averages. Sometimes they'll break it down in percentiles, like top 25 percenters, bottom 25 percenters, the two quartiles in the middle. And some will break it down a third. But very important to take a look at that. But those are actual numbers reported by franchisees for the previous year. Now, item 7, fantastic area to also explore and study. That's going to typically give you the range of what it's going to take you from an investment standpoint to open your doors within that franchise system. And again, those are actual numbers. Now, another thing that's pretty important, I'll mention it now. When you're in those 6 to 8 steps of the discovery process with whatever your top 3 brands are that you final with, for example, you want to make sure that typically it's around steps 3 or 4. It's called the validation process. Very, very important step, if not the most important step in those 6 to 8 step discovery process with the various brands. Validation means then going to let you talk to folks within their system. Now, the FTC tells us as franchise consultants, we have to be very careful with making income promises. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Why is that the case? Because everyone's going to have a different talent level. Everyone's coming to the table with something a little different in terms of their leadership ability or sales and marketing experience. So results will vary, right? But what I love about that validation process, the franchisor is going to allow you to actually talk to franchisees within their system. And I typically will recommend you want to talk to at least two in the top 25% and at least two in the bottom 25%. Now, what I love about that validation process, the franchisees that you're going to speak with in the validation process, they can actually pull out their P&L, right? Their profit and loss statements, their balance sheets, their cash flow statement. They can talk about what their gross revenues were in real time for 2023 in this case, for last year. And they can talk about, here was my net income, here was my EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. They can cover that kind of information with you, and they're happy to do it. Why are they happy to share this proprietary private information with you? Well, they know that when you get in the system, you've got certain talents and abilities and aptitude. You're going to be in that top 25%. And guess what? They've paid it forward. And now you'll be able to share some of your best practices that's the beauty of the franchise industry, is you're in business for yourself, but never by yourself. You got the franchisor and your peers or your other franchisee colleagues across the country. They typically will have quarterly meetings. They always typically will have an annual meeting, big kickoffs and big launch parties, and they're celebrating quite a few successes across their enterprise. So a great place to be. Liquid capital, good question. The best way I like to explain this one is when you bought your home. Let's say the home was $500,000. I know in some markets it might be $1 million, some homes it might be $250,000, but for the sake of the math, $500,000. Most bankers want you to put down 20% on a conventional loan, right? So 20% on 500 is $100,000 in terms of your down payment that they would require. And then they do 80% LTV or loan to value on the difference of the 400,000, right? But as is true in the case of when you bought your home, the banker also wants to see that you have something called some post-closing liquidity. They don't want to see you put your last nickel into your down payment. Now, how does that relate to the franchise industry in terms of funding and financing? Exactly the same kind of math. We don't call it a down payment. We call it a cash injection. So using that same example, if you had a $500,000 franchise, in fact, let's go less than that, $250,000. So 20% on 250,000 is of course 50,000. But just as was the case with your down payment on your home loan, same thing is true here. They also, the SBA or wherever you go for financing, they're going to want to see you also have something called post-closing liquidity, right? So that typically is another 10%. So on 250,000, they want you to have another 25,000. So 50,000 plus 25, that's 75,000 total. Now 25,000 is going to be left in your operating account, right? But the 50,000 is going to be used in that case against your cash injection. So $250,000 franchise, 50,000 cash injection is minus. So you're going to get a loan for 200,000, and that's going to be over typically a 10-year payoff period if it's an SBA loan. SBA loans never have an early prepayment penalty, never. Whether it's the SBA Express loan, that's $150,000 or less in terms of your franchise cost, or the SBA 7A loan, which is typically anything over $150,000. Sometimes our funding partners can bend that SBA Express loan up to about $175, $170 in some cases, depending on the model and the brand and the operating capital needed to launch and scale. Many entrepreneurial types have a strong desire to start their own business. However, they're not sure of the exact way or ways to fund their franchise or their startup. And that's why I put together this comprehensive, innovative funding strategies guide. It's going to walk you through the most popular methods available today to fund your franchise or your startup. It's going to include explanations on the SBA Express, the SBA 7A, home equity lines of credit, unsecured funding, portfolio loans, 401k rollovers, and a lot more. Download your free copy by clicking in the link in the description below. Okay, that's a great segue to financing and funding your franchise. So how much is the franchise fee? How much is the all-in cost? Typically, most franchise fees are going to run somewhere between 45,000 to 65,000. That delta is going to be about 20,000 in there. 45 to 65,000 will be your franchise fee. You pay that franchise fee no matter what, whether that's you working directly with the franchisor or you're working with an experienced, seasoned franchise consultant like myself. That fee doesn't change. The reason why that fee doesn't change is because if they lowered that franchise fee for you, then they're going to have to go back and maybe give a retroactive rebate to all the franchisees in their system over the past few years. And again, keep in mind, we're regulated by the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission. So that franchise fee is pretty set. Are there other fees involved above and beyond the franchise fee? Typically, yes. There are some other fees involved, maybe some training fees involved. There's a royalty involved. Most royalties will run somewhere between 6 to 8%, and that's in perpetuity. Well, some people wonder, yeah, but why don't I just start this business on my own? Yes, you can start your business on your own. You're always entitled to do that. But again, there's a reason why McDonald's charges a franchise fee and royalties for their franchisees, right? They've got the proven systems, the methods and procedures. They've got all the technology dialed in and dialed up. They've got a huge R&D department, research and development, where they're constantly inventing new offerings. They have a great training program that's already in place. It's already proven. You have the rights to use their trademark, their copyrights, as long as you're operating within that McDonald's franchise agreement. So take that concept, since you're probably most familiar with that, and apply it to non-food franchises that are out there. And there's a litany of them that are absolutely hitting the ball out of the park with their particular business models. So it's well worth it. Shaq, in fact, mentioned at our conference in San Diego a couple of years back, where he was the keynote speaker, when the moderator said, "Hey, Shaq, why did you elect to invest $200 million into the franchise industry? Why didn't you just start all these businesses from scratch on your own?" And what did he say? Why in the world, when I know nothing about some of the industries that I'm in, why would I go and start them from scratch when they've already baked the cake, so to speak? The recipe's already there. Okay, so that's a perfect segue to how to fund my franchise or how to fund my independent business. I want you to download our innovative Funding Strategies Guide by clicking on the description in the link below. It's a comprehensive guide on all the different loan types that are out there, loan strategies, and I'd like you to jump on a free, no obligation, 30-minute 45-minute phone consultation with one of our funding experts. Now, let's talk a little bit about credit score. What we look for, the franchise industry, is at least a credit score of 680 or greater. Why? Because that's the minimum that SBA looks for. If it's less than that, reach out to me. We've got some great credit building experts that we can connect you to. Background check, we don't do a background check at our level, but once you get into steps 6 to 8 of the discovery process with whatever those top 3 brands or business models are that you've chosen, they are going to want to do a background check for obvious reasons in terms of who they're going to be bringing into their system. Let's talk a little bit about launch times. Typically, if it's a remote work from home business model, you're looking at about, from the time the franchise agreement is signed, you could be open and operating and in training within the first 60 to 90 days from signing that franchise agreement. If we're talking about a brick and mortar model, I've got one right now that's an auto care franchise business model that requires a brick and mortar. It's over in the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area. So in that case, if it's a brick and mortar, they have a real estate team, a real estate department that's going to work with you. And once we put them in charge in this particular auto care case for that particular candidate, and they found it within the first 45 days. So you don't have to worry about that piece, but sometimes that will delay your opening depending on how quickly we can find the right facility and what kind of tenant improvements are going to be needed to be negotiated with the landlord. Let's talk about break even. Again, that depends on whether or not it's a remote model, work from home. Typically those, because you don't have the weight or the expenses associated with the brick and mortar, you're going to get to break even quicker there. Again, depending upon your sales and marketing background, your ability to build and scale a team. In most cases, we're looking at, for a remote model, we're looking at somewhere between month 6 to 15 where you can more than likely hit break even. However, for some brick and mortar models, and of course, much of this depends on, is it semi-absentee or is it a full-time push? We've seen some folks break even in the first 9 months. Some folks may take 18 months, some a little less, some a little more, again, depending upon your background and your talents. Okay, exiting a franchise. Okay, what happens if I get a terminal illness? What happens if I just want to exit the business for unknown reasons at this time? I don't know, but we get into it. And that can certainly happen. Again, if you're performing in that top echelon within that franchise system, great resale opportunities. Tell you a quick story. 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Most people are familiar with that brand. Household name now. Brian Scudamore, the founder and CEO, is the guy that's credited with pioneering that whole industry, the junk removal industry. Did you know that if you wanted to invest in a 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchise, that you could not buy one for any amount of money? Why not? That's because they're so successful that the existing franchisees and the franchisor themselves, they have first right of refusal. And so 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchises never get to the open market. They're never advertised because typically a 1-800-GOT-JUNK colleague next door in a contiguous territory or maybe even across the country hears about it and says, hey, I want it. They make you an offer and boom, you've just exited 2x, 3x, 5x. So there are always great exit opportunities. Again, when you get into that franchise brand, perform at that top tier, and I assure you, you will not have a problem with an exit. We've got a great, very comprehensive resale portfolio among our new franchise opportunities, and more than 650 of folks who do what I do for our particular organization across the country. And we're always interested in showing the right resale opportunity. So again, perform at the highest level. You won't have a problem with the exit strategy. Okay, I've just given you a great overview of what the franchise industry is, but there's a lot more information that you need to know. That's why I made an entire series of videos that go deeper into each one of those subjects. I want to make sure that you're well informed and that you make the best decision for you and your family. So click the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you there.